The radicalisation of young Muslims has been headline news over the past 24 hours. The Prime Minister says if allegations of a plot by Muslim hardliners to infiltrate schools in Birmingham are true, Ofsted will take action very quickly. Today, the only Muslim survivor of the 7/7 bombing, Sajda Mughal, says she's desperate to stop young Muslims being radicalised. The BBC has been given access to mothers who told us how their children, predominantly their sons, can get angered by events overseas in Muslim countries.
It used to be Palestine because I'm Palestinian, my kids, and they went through all the checkpoints and the border from Jordan to go into Palestine. How hard it was to move from place to place. And they came back here angry. Every demonstration for Palestine they used to go. And when they used to see the way like things are going, it wasn't right, like double standard in everything. But now they go for Syria. They go, 2 weeks ago my son was in the demonstration for Syria because they say something is not right.
That's one mum's assessment of the challenge of bringing up young Muslims in the UK. So how do we tackle the radicalisation of young Muslims? Let's talk to the social commentator Mohammed Ansar. Mohammed, good morning to you.
Morning, Jason.
Good morning. Welcome to BBC Radio Wells. Very interesting assessment from that mother there. How widespread is that view that there are predominantly young men in this country, growing up in this country, who are sympathetic to the plight of Muslims in Syria, Palestine, Iran, Iraq, wherever?
I think, firstly, it's not going to be just young men, but it's young men often we hear about. I think there's a very common thread throughout society, Muslim and I will say non-Muslim society as well, where people are feeling an incredible amount of pain and sympathy and hurt for events they see going on across the world. We have a far more connected world than ever before. We have a 24-hour news cycle, and so people are able to live through these events vividly, things they see happening, injustices in Israel and the plight of the Palestinian people, what's happening in Syria, what's happened in Chechnya in the past, and in other parts of the world, in Afghanistan too. And of course, we shouldn't really forget, what happened in Iraq. I mean, that was a huge event over the last 10 years, and people from all over the world turned up and were on the streets protesting and saying that these things shouldn't be happening.
So would you say then, Mo, that there is growing anger in the Muslim community?
I think it's very difficult to say whether there's been growing anger, and part of the reason for that is that the current systems for tackling and recognising radicalisation have failed significantly. They're fundamentally flawed. The problem has been that the organisations and the groups that the government engages to tackle radicalisation, like think tanks, like people like the Quilliam Foundation, relate this to a theological narrative within Islam. They relate it to a narrative of non-violent extremism. And actually, prior to, let's say, the events which happened in Woolwich, we saw that in London we had street-based activities. We had groups and organisations that were working with young people at the coalface, at the grassroots, listening to their voices, listening to what they had to say, and tackling them and almost, if you like, re-educating them, if that's not too much of a sort of Manichaean way of looking at things, but looking at re-educating young people. And when funding from those grassroots organisations is removed and is put into these US-style think tanks that deal at a high level with intelligence agencies and talks about narratives, and actually those organisations have very little credibility within Muslim communities. They're very much on the outside. They're rejected by mosques and civil society organisations. They often take money from the government for spying on Muslims, and that was reported in The Guardian a couple of years ago. This is completely the wrong strategy for tackling radicalisation in the UK.
What do you make of what's happening in Birmingham? Birmingham City Council has announced, Mo, that it's planning to increase the number of staff working on this investigation after these allegations of a plot to install head teachers and other senior staff and governors, big roles in schools in England, who are more sympathetic to Islam.
I think what we're beginning to see this year particularly, and the end of last year, is a series of witch hunts which have been going on against mainstream Muslim organisations and public figures, and I've been one of them. And one of the interesting things I found from this case was that the core article which underpins all of this is an anonymous article written by an anonymous writer. And so We don't know who wrote it and why, but we do know that this is effectively a dodgy dossier which has been put together, and it's been completely rejected by the chairman of the governors of those schools and by the communities and the organisations.
Mo, sorry to cut across you. If it's a dodgy dossier, even the Prime Minister, David Cameron, is commenting on it.
But well, I mean, it's not the first time I've seen Prime Ministers commenting on supporting dodgy dossiers, is it? I mean, I have a lot of time for the Prime Minister, but I think this is I think we need to, separate the wheat from the chaff here. If there are allegations which are substantiated, then they obviously need to be looked at. However, this witch hunt, and it's part of this kind of new McCarthyism we've seen against Muslim groups and communities across the country, whether it's people like Saeed Abbasi or Salma Yaqub or people like me, we have so many daily smears and attacks on Muslim community figures. It's part of the marginalisation of Muslims in society. We have lots of Muslims doing fantastic positive work. Why don't we hear about one of the top performing Muslim schools in the country, which is an all-girls Muslim school based in the north of England? I mean, there are fantastic success stories, and Muslims have been long integrated and long contributing to British community life. Yeah. And Muslims also come in all shapes and all forms. And if anybody says that they have the key or are the gatekeepers on who acceptable Muslims are and who are unacceptable Muslims are, I think we're going to start having difficulties. Can
we say that Muslims are included in UK life?
We are part of UK life. We are included in UK life. And whether we see a new round of hysterical media reporting, not thankfully from you, but certainly from other, let's say, more tabloid sources, whether it's halal meat, burqas, segregation, integration, radicalisation, schools, even FGM, or even more recently the immigration debate, we need to start accepting that let's move the dialogue from one of integration to one of contribution. Muslims are here. We're part of British public life. We've been contributing for the longest period. And many people who live with Muslims will recognise them as wonderful, peaceful people who are contributing positively to British life.
One final question, Mo. Going back to that piece of audio I played you of that mum and, her job of trying to bring up her son in the United Kingdom, and he is sympathetic to the plight of Muslims worldwide. Do you accept, though, that there is a lot of work to do? The Islamic community in the UK, in Wales, in England, wherever it may be, has a lot of work to do to weed out the possible radicals.
There's a lot of work for Muslim communities to do. There's a lot of work within wider society to tackle radicalisation as well. Radicalisation isn't something that is just exclusively within Muslim communities. And the sooner that government and civil society organisations recognise that all communities need to tackle these issues, the better.
Very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. That's the social commentator Mohammed Ansar.